Requiem, a Requiem for London. Tonight, we begin our scene in once upon a time a familiar location. Battersea, a power station. A relic from another time. A landmark alongside the River Thames that sits opposite the Churchill Gardens in Westminster. Soon to be bought out to be nothing more than another series of luxury apartments and flats. For the moment, it stands as a historic landmark of what the city used to represent. In Coldmorn, perhaps you would normally have no interest in this place other than perhaps for the purposes of remodeling it into a series of luxury apartments and flats. However, after getting in touch with the ever elusive Bagman, he has invited you to the ground floor of a Battersea power station. Via his ever useful network, as he calls it. To discuss the topic of these hunter groups and how best to deal with them in light of all these new revelations, given that they are now posing a significantly more sizable and obvious threat to the safety of the domain. You find yourself in fact, I'll just show you a there you go. And listen to what you see. You find yourself in one of the old control rooms. With a lot of rusting machinery that probably hasn't seen use in decades. And leaves a less than impressive impression. In fact, the place is slowly falling apart with time, but it is a very slow aging process.
Well, don't just stand there, Bagman. Come out. I've already gotten my shoes dirty on your account.
Well, I'm sitting, actually. and he'll just sharp. He'll just one of the seats will just rotate and wheel around, revealing the iconic Bagman in his natural habitat, supposedly a rundown, slowly rotting, out-of-date power station.
You know, of all of London, the lights of Soho or the cocktail bars of Camden, it makes an odd deal of sense that you choose this festering carcass.
Well, for a bunch of corpses, we do like to make our homes amongst the living. And I'd rather not be with the living right now, considering they want to stick a tree branch into my chest and stick me to a sunroof.
You almost sound, Bagman, as if they've rattled you. Have they gotten closer to you personally than you'd like?
They're pretty close to all of us at this point.
You're not wrong. Coldmorn lights a cigar, for the record, before placing it in his mouth. He offers one to Bagman to see if he'll take one.
He'll point to his balaclava.
Very good. I will be frank with you, Mr. Bagman. Myself and the King have had a discussion on the topic, and I think that you're the individual whose brain it is to pick on this topic. He casually walks around the room, kind of making a show of looking at the crumpled down, broken technology before he'll add, "The hunters know too much about us for a clandestine operation on the outside. I'm curious who your money is on for our mole."
There are a couple of possibilities. He just sort of strokes his forehead. Given what they know, what they don't know, it's either someone very high up the chain of command, or it's no one at all. I don't think it's someone who's boots on the ground or some pissed off neonate who's tired of being a pawn in some Elder's game or whatever narrative they've constructed for themselves. They wouldn't know enough. Not unless they're a very valuable pawn, but even then they would have to go up the chain of command to learn more. They'd have to target kindred of greater standing, age and power, and they haven't done that yet. They've started.
They start at the bottom, but they're moving their way up.
Yeah. Starting with the roots, making their way up the stem. Which is
There's one... Oh, sorry, you continue.
Which is a problem because it indicates they're already in their own game.
There's one name that keeps coming to the back of my mind, you know. Because it would be his MO. Casually presses his button, one of the buttons that clearly doesn't work anymore. We'll turn back and he'll say, "I keep thinking in the back of my head, if this was a shadow war, and how I would wage it, I'd use the humans as my tools. I'd need to be very old and very powerful to do so. And it just so happens that there's a very old, very powerful kindred who used to possess a very specific throne and who lost it, but who would be very good at this kind of manipulation.
You could have gotten them started.
Hmm. After all, there are still Graves loyalists in this city, mostly in our particular organization. I like the current king. The queen's a batshit crazy bitch, but then again, we all knew that to begin with. I don't know. I see hands moving, and I see. You're right, Mr. Bagman. They're very much in their end game. So what do we do about it?
I've been mulling over that myself. You said you've been in touch with the king about it. I've been in contact with my own people in both senses of the word about it.
What have you managed to find out?
Well, that name you gave me,
Hmm.
links back, well, to an alias. I've done some digging on the woman. The name you gave me isn't her real one. But,
In all honesty, I didn't anticipate it was.
no. She, but even then, she doesn't have any friends, family. Nothing personal to leverage. She's very, very detached, and I think it's by design. But she does have links to other powers.
Define other powers.
You know what Thames House is?
Out of curiosity, out of character, I think I remember that, but could you give me a prompt? Because I know Thames House has been a thing before.
It's the HQ for MI5.
The HQ for MI5.
How I put this? You know that as the kindred that I am, that I see things.
Connections and other such and sundry.
Hmm. I saw a man at a bordering table with your mark and a few other individuals I recognized.
Coldmorn withdraws the sketch from his pocket that the maquette did for him, of the man who sent the box with the demands in it. And he holds up the paper and he says, "Would this happen to be the gentleman?"
Nah, don't recognize that one.
Continue with your point.
There are a couple of individuals I recognised. Most of them I didn't. But I remember seeing 3 men. And 2 women. And if I recall, I believe one of them was Strickland. The new brand manager at Chiron.
I knew that Chiron was messed up in this, which is why I now own a portion of it in order to have an easy foot in the door.
I didn't get much more than that. There are a few snippets of conversation, but it was broken up. Something about prophecies and, you know, how they're tricky and not very clear and all that. I don't know.
I hate prophecies.
Disciplines are not exactly a science. I mean, the Ordo might disagree, but not really in my experience. Not a precise one in any sense of the word.
I think it's time that we have a conversation with Miss Strickland.
I know she often runs around very well secured. Sort of like that Commander Grant lady you've had me go after.
Leave her to me. I should be more than a match for her security. And I'll try to do this without spilling blood, if possible. That's just messy. After all, I am a major shareholder in the Chiron group. If I was to ask for a private tour, it's very difficult for her to simply fob me off.
Yeah, be careful. These mortals have remained in their shadows for quite a while, not because they were just stumbling around in the dark. They know what they're doing.
I quite agree, and that's what makes them dangerous. However, now that I've voiced the theory out loud, that's going to bother me. It all seems to fit too perfectly when you look at it, when you strip it all away. It all looks... It's all too perfect. It's all too in a row.
And what way do you mean?
I mean... Let me ask you an honest question, Bagman. What is the current state of the princedom in terms of how healthy is the domain?
If it wasn't for the hunters, I'd actually say it'd be doing quite well. But with this threat left unchecked as it stands, I'm not sure I can say it's in such a good state.
And every day that the threat isn't answered, we look weaker. The issue is that this is how power struggles begin. Stanforth is too much of a conciliator.
Well, I'm curious as to why he's not answering it. I know he has the capacity to do so.
What do you mean?
Oh. He has ties all over the domain. He could basically run the police force personally if he wanted. He has ties to every single political party in the city, local and national. He has investments in multiple businesses. And I know he owns at least one as a shadow investor. It's a bit difficult to be more influential than Stanford, at least on a mortal basis. He has his fingers in just about every pie. Hell, in some he's just got the whole pie. So I don't know why he's not using that power.
Coldmorn stops and kind of quirks an eyebrow. Unless... Is it possible that Stanforth is being held in check by forces that we are not seeing? Vis-a-vis, he has all of these influences and finances, but what if he had to constantly struggle just to keep them in check if somebody was trying to actively make moves on him that we're not seeing? Essentially keeping him in check.
Well, I know a few of his own contacts in the police force. Don't tell him I told you that. I just like to keep tabs on people. And I know he's been struggling to keep things in check with the police recently. I always assumed it was the hunters, in the sense that I can only imagine things would be moving even more quickly if he weren't acting on it. If he was acting on it, but now I'm wondering if he actually has been, or if he's just been distancing himself from his own contacts so as to make himself less traceable, or if he's deliberately not using his power. It could be that there's another force at work. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we have one in Morgan. She has her influence in other areas.
That marriage was a mistake. Us being tied to the crone in this way was a mistake. It was a necessity at the time, but it's still... I feel as though... What happens when the unconquered are conquered?
Oh, I can give you answers to that. If you just want to take a plane to New York, the Carthins will tell you all about it. I believe we do still have an inner circle over there. But, yeah, Carthins run that shit show.
Out of curiosity, he casually turns and he says, and this I'll happily pay prestation. Because, let's face it, Bagman, you like having people in your pocket. But now that I've gotten on the topic of it, you're the man who might have the answer. I have means of getting some information, but not all of it. But you know nearly everyone and everything. See, I've been thinking about this more and more. The hunters have been working on this for years. I've seen reports that show that some of their evidence linking to their raids go back over a decade. So I'm curious. When he left the city, do you know what actually happened to Graves?
I know he didn't go very far. Bagman, with the cigarette you've given him, he hasn't actually lit it, or lit it, just because of he doesn't want to lower his mask, but he's just sort of been playing with it in the meantime. There are no reports of him dying anywhere. No blood hunts, no nothing like that.
Even if they were to declare a blood hunt on him, I think that only the foolish or the suicidal would attempt to take it up.
That depends. Even Valeris would struggle against an entire domain.
Yes.
But he didn't go very far. Last word of anything about him was in Slough. Then he just fell off the radar.
Slough, you say?
Yeah. Didn't even really announce himself either. Just showed up and then snaps his fingers. Vanished. Like dust on the wind. Like a cat.
It's almost like it's your people's particular proclivity. Mine is being seen, yours is not.
And it was always... it's always been our clan's instinct to pull at things from behind the scenes in ways that even other kindred find extreme. Graves was always good at that. Tends to be a bit direct in how he did it. But he was very good at it.
Well, I've said I'm going to look into that matter, Bagman, and I will. I'll look into this Chiron group and its connection to the hunters. But if you'll excuse me, I suddenly wish to go and look into another matter.
Good luck
ask...
Oh.
Oh, no, you can do.
You know me, Balthazar. I wish you good luck and hope you're successful, but do be careful. I'm sure you already know this, given that in many ways you're as informed as me, which is the highest compliment I can give a man, really. But you are very much under a spotlight.
Yes. Of this, we are both brutally aware. You take care of this. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so keep your eyes out just in case, because if they haven't made a move on you yet, I would be questioning why.
It's difficult to make a move on someone when they use the public eye as their spotlight. It's easy to hit somebody in the shadows. It's harder to hit them when they're standing center stage. But your point is valid, Mr. Bagman. If you'll excuse me, I'll bid you good evening.
Alright.
So, Chris, as I walk out, I'd like to do a thing, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to use where the bodies are buried. And I'd like to ask some questions.
Alright, so you're gonna get in touch with some people.
Yeah.
Let me go get the core book up.
Yeah, cool. It is on page 115.
Oh, thank you. Oh, 115, not 155. I'm stupid.
115.
Okay.
And I'd like to ask questions about the former Prince Graves.
Okay.
In order to garner some information, if that is okay.
Yes.
I see. Okay, so I can do. So I can ask up to 3 questions because that is my Invictus status. So let's go
Yes.
with the first one. Who would this vampire run to if he were in trouble?
There are... There are a few figures that Graves was known to trust. The first was the former seneschal who defected around the time of the war and is considered one of the major reasons why he lost power. In part simply due to the fact that her defection was a mark of weakness upon the prince in the first place, but also because it's believed she handed over very valuable information that led to his downfall. The second was a woman known as Cynthia Gauntlet, who ran a private military company, or sorry, a private military contractor by the same name. That was broken up a decade ago. At the end of the war, its component pieces sold off between the various vultures of the Invictus. Cynthia herself disappeared shortly after the war's conclusion. It's believed she was destroyed by partisans of the new king and queen as a matter of cleaning out any potential opposition, but no comment was ever made on the matter, so nobody's really certain, but she certainly hasn't revealed herself to anybody if she is in the domain anymore. She's either likely dead or fled for her life and somehow survived, but in any case, she's certainly not active within domain politics anymore. The third... I was going to say, there is a third. One second, let me go find him real quick. Where is he? A man by the name of Alec Gadai, currently an Archon within the domain's ranks. Always had a odd relationship with the old prince. Never participated in any of his purges. And with your feed into Invictus internal politics, was always known to oppose them, found them tasteless at best, or impractical, unbecoming of a royal member of the domain. But always abided by the prince's word, always worked for the betterment of Invictus power in the domain. Oddly enough, despite the internal opposition to his methods, the prince never really took a strong stance against him. And the two were known to cooperate on matters relating to domain security very frequently. It should also be noted that Alec is is also a maquette. And one second. Is a habit. Although it was known that the prince was simply a maquette, if he expressed any powers of a habit, he or rather, if he was a habit, he never expressed any powers of their bloodline. So it's generally understood that he was not of their bloodline. But that is something to note about Mr. Godai.
Alright, the next question we're going to ask about Graves is currently, because he's still alive, we think, what is the vampire's main source of income?
Before his collapse, his fall from grace, Graves was heavily invested into the tech industry of London. He had the general ties to finance that a lot of Invictus have in London. After all, it's basically impossible not to if you're a kindred seeking power in the domain. But he was very heavily invested in tech startups. And had a and actually was specifically quite heavily invested in cryptocurrency.
Interesting. What about now? Because I think I do get up-to-date information.
Now, he's kind of off the grid. So it's difficult to say. No Invictus in the domain has been in contact with him for years, to your knowledge. So it's not immediately obvious. But with the information you have, he probably still has at least some of those investments. It's unlikely they could have wiped him clean off the board entirely. Even if he and his allies were crippled, they would likely maintain some assets somewhere. It is likely that if Gauntlet lives, she likely has investments in security and paramilitary firms somewhere.
Okay, important question. Of the kindred, so of Gauntlet and the former, how old a kindred was Gauntlet?
Oh, pardon?
How old a kindred was Gauntlet? Was she a neonate? Was she an ancestor?
She was a neonate.
I have a question about her, because I can ask him 3 questions, and I think I know how I'm going to bait him out, or I'm going to bait this out. Because Graves is more complicated, because he's an elder and has like a bajillion identities, probably. Gauntlet's probably easier. So I'm going to ask, and also she's much younger, which is another very important thing. So, who is the vampire's this is Gauntlet, who is the vampire's closest living family member?
Gauntlet, she was known to have a nephew and a niece. They're probably adults with their own families now. She was not known to have any living children, and her parents were known or believed to be dead by either the time of her embrace or shortly afterwards. But she did have some extended family.
Well, I guess I'm going to go and basically, I low-key think Graves might either be behind this or have a lot of information on this, because this goes back to when he was Prince, if my information is correct. So he either started this, or he might have been around during its genesis. So from my point of view, I want to talk to him, and I think the best way to go to try and find him is to go and try and find one of his minions or lackeys. And as I said, I think the Gauntlet is probably easier to find than Graves is. Would you say that that is a fair assertion?
You could try and do that, yeah.
So that is
Oh, sorry, what were you going to do?
basically, I now know who Gauntlet's family are, her nearest blood relatives. I'd like to go and pay them a visit.
Okay. I will roll others. Actually, no, it's my time. Okay. So, it's not hard to track them down. They're not exactly invisible people. The nephew merely lives in a, it's quite a shabby, apartment complex on the east side of London. Venice currently lives in the inner city of London, studying at university.
We'll go for the boy first, and if he has no useful information, we'll girl.
Okay.
So, Chris, because of my resources lots and my influence banking lots, Balthazar will have two briefcases with him, which each contain £100,000 in small unmarked notes. Two separate briefcases. Is that okay?
Okay.
It's much easier to bribe people than it is to threaten them in Balthazar's perspective.
Okay.
From his...
Yeah, I will. 1 second, let me apply, because I believe that would apply as soft leverage. Let me double check though, because it's actually Chronicles that has the proper full social maneuvering system, and for some reason not Requiem.
Because it goes across all of the books.
Yeah. Social maneuvering, blah, 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 blah. This would be soft leverage. Sometimes offers of first appearance in order to look at any offer from... Okay, then you have an impression of good. You can roll to leave your starting impression. Actually, no, it doesn't really matter. Just make me a generic social roll as to what information you're exactly looking for.
Bear with me just a moment. I just walked up to. I just stood up to grab a drink.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do.
And while they are suspicious, I'm not going to have them necessarily say anything because they're kind of falling on hard times.
So it'd be manipulation, persuasion. Does my spec and deal making apply?
Deal making, yes.
Plus my majesty and my equipment bonus.
Hmm.
So 9, 13, 16. And why not? We'll spend the willpower for root. Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, we'll say both are very forthcoming with you, mainly because you're offering to basically pay off one student debt forever, and the other one you're basically buying them like a house. So Bilf will tell you that they get in contact, rather their aunt gets in contact with them every few months. She largely just goes through the motions with them. Just asks them how their day has been. She only ever calls them up at night, which is a bit strange to both of them. And they definitely suspect something. In fact, they suspect quite a lot, as the dismantling of her company has been lingering over the whole family for years, and it's one of the major reasons why a lot of them are out of pocket now. Something that's been a point of contention within the family for a while. She has, however, been regularly sending them money to try and keep them afloat. Even in her diminished state.
Ooh, so what Balthazar will ask is she sending the money via check, wire transfer, or just cash?
Apparently it's plugged straight into their bank accounts.
Excellent. That is just the answer I wanted.
They're a bit nervous at giving you this information, but at the same time, you're offering them a lot of money, and surely nothing particularly harmful could come of this. It's not just telling you that, she contacts them every once in a while, and she contacts them once in a while, and she gives them money, and surely that couldn't be used to hurt her.
So, Chris, what we're going to do is, I'd like to leverage because allies count as 1 dot below currently, for the purposes of using them, right?
Yes. The capacity to use our allies is somewhat diminished right now.
Mm-hmm. I assume with using 2 dots of my banking allies, because I've got 3 dots currently, because it's 2 dots from being me 1 dot from my notary status because I've applied it to my banking allies because I can do that. So it gives me a working allies of 2 as opposed to 3. I assume that using 2 dots of banking allies should be more than sufficient to trace an account.
You could probably chase an account in that way, yeah.
That's what I'll do. Basically, I'd like to know where the account was last accessed, if it was an IP, etc., where the confusion where it was accessed. Because banks keep account of these things.
Yes, they do. So, if the account was last accessed in Watford,
If they give me an address, it's going to go there.
yeah, you can acquire an address.
Excellent. In that case, we will go.
Okay. We'll head on over to Watford. This actually takes a little bit. This takes like a while because Watford is places.
Isn't Watford where London officially?
I'm not entirely sure. So I can't answer that question, I'm afraid, because I am dumb. But you make it to Watford. Watford is a pretty quiet town. You don't sense any kindred making your way through.
Coldmorn will get to the address and step out of the car. He's not trying to hide himself in any way, if that makes sense. Like he's walking with his ordinary candor.
Okay.
Basically, if this woman is paranoid about people trying to kill her, most people who are trying to kill you won't just walk up the driveway. You know what I mean?
That's true and fair. So, you walk up to the potential haven. You do sense a predatory aura somewhere inside the building.
Knock, 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 knock.
There will be a long silence. The beast within shifts around. But eventually it will open. Revealing a woman with about in her early to mid 30s, her hair done up in a bun, wearing surprisingly casual clothing, maybe not expecting a visitor. Very pale skin, and looks at you rather plainly. She seems to have a rather hostile, resting expression.
Does she possess one predatory aura?
She does.
My dear Madam Gauntlet. I was going to say, considering Balthazar used to be a member of House was House Tomb? Was it? What was the name of the old house? Black Tomb?
Black Tomb, yeah.
It's up to you whether they know each other.
Who are you?
My apologies, my lady. Sir Balthazar Coldmorn, notary of the Invictus, etc., etc., etc. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. He will extend the hand.
She takes a moment to gauge whether she wants to shake it at all, but will eventually do so. Her grip is quite cold.
His grip is quite strong, but I'm not crushing down. Delightful to meet you, my lady. I do apologize for the lateness of my arrival and the unannounced nature of it. However, you and I have business to discuss.
Why are you here?
I'm here because you are quite possibly one of the few kindred in the domain around London who can answer me a very specific question. And for that question, I'm willing to pay handsomely.
Payment isn't the issue, but please come inside.
Much obliged. He will step inside. Balthazar, as always, is dressed very formally and he leans on a cane. But he will say, you are one of the few kindred in and around the domain of London who will be able to answer me the following question, as I've said, and I am quite eager to hear your answer and your price for the answering of said question. Where is it that one may contact our illustrious former prince? His first name was Cedric, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Cedric Graves.
She sighs. It's always about graves. She'll snap her fingers to you notice as you walk into the living room there are two mortal vessels. One of them has a nicked palm. I can smell the stain of blood in a glass of wine. She'll place another one on the small table between two chairs, and she'll have the other mortal bleed into the once clean glass for you.
Ah, much obliged.
Not
Coldmorn will take the office seat, for the record.
Yeah. Not quite the reserves I once had, but I do not go from or arrive to anywhere with nothing to offer.
Well, as I've said, I'm most anxious to have a meeting arranged between myself and our former prince, and I'm quite willing and happy to pay rather well for an introduction.
I don't find Graves. Graves finds me. But I could inform him when he does that you desire to make your presence known to him.
I would be most grateful. And what is it exactly that you would like in return?
Nothing as of the moment.
Oh. Nothing. Not even a boon. Those can be saved for later.
I believe you'll understand the appropriate time to put your weight behind me.
I sense that someone is planning a return. Would that perhaps be correct?
Of a sort.
You must remember, my dear Miss Gauntlet, we fought on the same side during the war. I'm more than happy, free of charge, to aid you in whatever return you may have. I believed in the cause that we fought for, and I believed why we fought. He shrugs casually. Consider it a... well, how to best phrase it? Matter of my deepest respect.
That may be true, but it has been well over a decade. Allegiances and people shift and change.
I remember oaths, Miss Gauntlet. I remember words spoken. It's somewhat my job. Loyalty. Somewhat of a calling, you might say.
True, but then you would know perhaps better than any of us how the rules can be bent to suit one's needs.
Quite true, unfortunately.
And you are part of a society that is not as friendly, not as amicable to me as it once was. And very, very hostile to those I once associated with.
Things change, Miss Gauntlet. As it stands, London is gripped by more fear than I think it has ever experienced in the past. When it was that we fought the wars, at least we were fighting kindred. We came at each other in the old and traditional ways. Admittedly, some of us push the boundaries of honorable combat. He very casually shrugs. But now we fight an enemy that is faceless, an enemy that has outmaneuvered us at every turn. It's moments like these when people start to look with fondness for the good old days. If you knocked, I could have just answered the door. I mean, standing up and walking like 15 feet is not effort.
No, but I mean, like, knocking versus getting.
Hello.
Oh my god, my scene is being ruined. How dare Terry?
How dare Terry come home?
Yeah, she should be out in the streets.
Can we be recorded for vampire histories?
Yes.
No!
Also, apparently, according to Chris, and I quote, you should be out working the streets.
No, out on the streets, not Jesus Christ. I mean, that's only. I mean, my statement was only marginally better, but still. Anywho, Terry's dirty secrets being exposed to the public aside.
The secret of me entering doors occasionally.
Yes. Gauntlet will just say, perhaps, but Blacktoon was not reminiscent of the good old days. I remember a decade ago we were seen as the future, not the past. It was Valerius that was seen as the past.
Valerius is a relic who's gone to his cold tomb. As it stands now, we have the choice of anarchy or stability. And I think that, as I've said, he will very casually shrug. The more blood that's spilt in the streets, kindred that are dragged kicking and screaming from their beds into the sunlight, the more it is that people will care again for the good old days. And what was old may become new again.
I suppose we will see if the king and the queen agree.
Balthazar will smile, or he will stand up and he will say, if you would be so kind to pass on my deepest respects to Master Graves and inform him that I will be more than happy to receive him at his leisure. And he takes out a piece of paper and writes his cell phone number down and places it down. And should you ever require my help, my dear, you have only but to ask.
I shall keep that in mind. If I may ask, how did you track me down?
He contemplates for a few moments and says, unfortunately, when your relatives are used to living the high life, when it is they suddenly fall to earth like Icarus did, well, they become all the more greedy for what it was they once had.
I shall keep that in mind. If she has thoughts on that subject, she does not express them.
And Coldmorn doesn't care about it. But yeah, he will stand up, he will offer a polite little bow, and he will depart for the night.
Right, and I think that's how we can end this scene. With Terry crashing it horribly. Isn't she just the worst? Let's end the scene there. Terry is just the worst. Thank you, players, for playing. Thank you, watchers, for watching. We'll see you all next time.